What if the story you've carried all your life, your origin, your place in the world, was hidden on a map that never wrote your name? Tonight, we go searching, across deserts, through memory, from Cush to Nigeria. This is not a treasure hunt for conspiracy. It is a journey of evidence and faith, side by side. We'll follow the old rivers of Scripture, step into the forests where bronze once sang, and ask a daring question. Does Nigeria have a biblical history or a biblical destiny? Stay to the end. The answer may change how you see this land and yourself. The biblical history of Nigeria, fact or faith, a documentary exploration. We begin with a map. Not the map you know, drawn with colonial lines, the map of memory. On that older parchment, the Bible speaks of Egypt, of Cush, the lands south of the Nile. It whispers on the North African coast, and Sheba across incense roads and red waters. But to the far west, where the Niger curls like a sleeping serpent, the page is quiet. No label, no verse, only silence. And yet, silence is not absence. Silence is an invitation. Because while prophets thundered in Jerusalem, while pharaohs carved their names in stone, people far from those scrolls were hammering iron, shaping clay, and dreaming their own dreams. In the green heart of West Africa. Our film does not force a line where none exists. It follows the lines that do: geography, archaeology, tradition, and faith. 4 roads converging on one question: what is our true story? In the language of Scripture, Africa is not a continent of 54 nations. It is a corridor, the Nile Valley, and the Red Sea world. The Bible's gaze falls on Mizraim, Egypt, hundreds of times. It points to Cush, the kingdom south of Egypt, the power of Nubia stirring like a drumbeat beneath the cataracts. Put lies toward Libya, Sheba shines from the incense kingdoms of southern Arabia and the Horn. Notice the pattern. The biblical world hugs the eastern edges of Africa, closest to the trade winds and caravan routes that fed Israel's horizon. The text does not name the forests of the Niger. It does not speak the word Nigeria. So why look west at all? Because history is larger than its labels. The Bible is a book rooted in place, but its influence is a river. Rivers flow. If you stand at the delta of the Niger at dawn, the sky feels ancient, as if some story were waiting there. Older than every oath, younger than every nation. That sense, that presence, is our compass. Now enter the green. Follow the ridges and plateaus into central Nigeria, where archaeologists found a people who shaped terracotta with a gaze so human, you can almost hear them breathe. Nok. The Nok civilization, emerging as early as the second millennium before Christ and enduring into the first, was not a footnote. It was a full song. Ironsmiths coaxed fire into metal. Sculptors made faces that could still arrest you across 3,000 years. Farmers tamed the soil. Communities formed, traded, told stories. While psalms rose in Jerusalem, iron rang in the savannah. Travel east to Igbo-Ukwu and touch bronze so intricate it seems woven, not cast. Evidence of trade, ritual, craftsmanship from a later age. Drift southwest to Ife, where art achieved a naturalism so luminous it feels like truth standing still. Then to Benin, where kings walked through gates of red earth and history wore brass like thunder. None of these names appear in the Bible, and yet none of them need to be magnificent. This is the point in our journey where the two roads, Scripture and soil, run parallel. They do not collide, they correspond. Different verses, same era. Human desire, human craft, human hope. So the question turns, not, were we written in their book, but what book were we writing here? Every people carries a memory older than fact, the place where history and poetry hold hands. The Yoruba tell of Odùduwà, a figure from the East, a founder whose story bends across seas and sands. The Igbo hold a mirror to the ancient world and see patterns, circumcision, reverence for law, a day set apart, and some say, we are children of Israel. Listen closely. In these claims are not merely proofs being argued. There are wounds being healed. Centuries of rupture, slave raids, colonial erasures, the violence of being renamed, have left deep hunger for an origin that cannot be stolen. To say we come from Abraham is often less a footnote and more a prayer. Our task is reverent honesty. Some parallels can be explained by the common logics of human culture. Others may reflect trade routes, shared practices, convergent ideas, and some remain mysteries that touch the soul more than the spreadsheet. So we will not mock the longing that seeks family in Scripture. We will also not pretend the scroll spells what it does not say. We will hold both, the scholar's discipline and the believer's heartbeat. The search for roots is not a court case. It is a pilgrimage. Centuries pass. Caravans cross the Sahara. Islam arrives first to the Sahel, to Kanem-Bornu, to Hausa cities, long before the Atlantic world awakens to this coast. Through merchants and scholars came Arabic texts, law, poetry, a new script for old wisdom. Then the ocean opens. The 15th century sails in on wooden ribs and white canvas. Portuguese envoys step into Benin and Warri, carrying crosses and crowns, politics and prayer in the same chest. There are baptisms and broken promises, chapels and cannons, the sacred and the cynical tangled like nets in the surf. But within that tangle, a miracle. A child taken, enslaved, delivered. Samuel Ajayi Crowther finds freedom again and answers a call that will echo for generations. The Bible, once confined to foreign tongues, begins to speak Yoruba, then Igbo, then the languages of this forest and savanna. Words that traveled on papyrus and parchment now wear palm oil and harmattan dust. They belong. And when a people hear the sacred in their own voice, something irreversible happens. Scripture is no longer imported. It is incarnated. It sits in kitchens, rides in buses, sings in choirs, wrestles in marketplaces. The land that the Bible never named learned to name itself within the Bible's hope. Today, the question returns with new urgency. In synagogues lit by Nigerian sun, in churches where drums meet psalms, in mosques where recitation folds dawn into duty, people ask, where do we come from? Who are we in the story of God? Academics sift pottery and pollen, chart languages like family trees, and many conclude, the Bible's geography never reached this far west. And yet pastors, rabbis, imams, elders, and artists reply, geography is not the end of the world. Meaning travels farther than maps. Perhaps that is the thread we've been following all along. A thread that does not deny evidence but also refuses to starve the soul. You can affirm that Nok is Nok, Ife is Ife, Benin is Benin, and still recognize that the biblical drama of exile and homecoming, of covenant and justice, of fall and redemption, speaks across time, across tongues, across the Niger's wide brown back. So is there a biblical history of Nigeria? If by that we mean a chapter and verse that writes this land's name, no. If by that we mean the discovery that the Bible's river has flowed into Nigeria's story so deeply that millions now live, love, forgive, and fight for good because of it, then yes, there is a biblical history here. Not of mention, but of meaning. But to tell Nigeria's place in this living story, we must speak of the wounds. In the northeast, an insurgency learned to speak the language of fear. In the northwest, banditry took root. In the middle belt, farms and herds collided as land thinned and tempers rose. Churches alike have buried their dead. The scholar will call it a web of factors. Insurgent groups like Boko Haram and ISWAP, criminal networks, climate stress, small arms, slow justice. The parent will call it by a simpler word, loss. And yet, the faithful keep gathering. You can chart it in reports and headlines. Villages razed in the middle belt, worshippers attacked in prayer, prosecutions that struggle to catch up, each line a tremor through a nation's heart. And still, the choirs return on Sunday. Yet Nigeria keeps producing torchbearers, voices that sang revival into the dark. Think of Joseph Ayo Babalola, whose 1930 Oke-Uye revival shook the forests and helped birth a movement. Think of Benson Papa Idahosa, who pushed African Christianity onto the world stage. Think of W.F. Kumuyi, E.A. Adeboye, and many others who turned gatherings into rivers and rivers into seas. Persecution did not silence them, it refined the sound. Names carry prayers. Consider Abia, a state that chose to be known as God's own state. Matthew 1:7. Even its very name is a braid of places. Aba, Bendi, Iswikwato, Afikpo stitched together into one identity. A civic motto is not a prophecy, but it is a declaration of desire. We belong to God. May our life reflect it. So why the suffering and yet the song? Because every revival in Scripture rose from pressure, wilderness before promise, exile before return, a cross before dawn. If cartographers once drew a biblical world that stopped at the Nile, perhaps heaven now traces lines they never saw, lines of prayer, endurance, and mercy arcing over Lagos, Jos, Enugu, Kano, Port Harcourt, and Abia. We will say it plainly. Nigeria may not sit on the Bible's ancient map, but it stands in God's present movement. Not in cartography, but in divine order. Not by mention, but by mission. Stand again at the delta at dusk. The sky burns copper. Fishermen draw their nets as if pulling a line through time. Somewhere far to the east, the old places of Scripture glow in the last light. But the light is also here, in the terracotta smile of Nok, in the bronze stare of Ife, in the hymn rising from a tin-roofed church, in the quiet faith of a market woman whispering a psalm, in the scholar's careful footnote, in the rabbi's blessing, in the imam's call, in the drum that says, "We endured." The Bible may not have named Nigeria, but Nigeria has named itself within the Bible's promise. That all nations will be blessed, that justice belongs to widows and orphans, that exile is not the end, that the hungry are seen. Write it this way: we were not on their map, but we are in the plan. Nigeria is a focal point for the coming revival, not by ancient geography, but by divine ordering of this hour. And from Cush to the Niger, the river is rising. If you are new to this channel and love videos like this, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.